It was an ordinary summer morning in the small seaside town of Windermere, where the sun rose early and the salty breeze whispered through the streets. The town was famous for its old lighthouse that stood proudly on the cliff, overlooking the endless ocean. Tourists often visited Windermere, drawn to its beauty and the stories of sailors who once braved its treacherous waters. For the people living there, however, it was just home, a place where life flowed slowly and predictably. Among the town's residents was 15-year-old Clara, a bright and curious girl with a restless spirit. Her family had moved to Windermere only 2 years ago, and while she had grown to appreciate its charm, Clara often longed for adventure. She spent her days riding her bike through the cobbled streets, exploring hidden corners, and sketching the world around her in her worn-out notebook. Clara's closest friend was Sam, a cheerful and loyal boy with an endless love for stories. He lived a few houses away and had spent his entire life in Windermere. The two were inseparable, and together they turned the town into their playground. They often explored the cliffs near the lighthouse, telling each other ghost stories about old sailors or hidden treasures left behind long ago. On the first day of summer vacation, Clara woke up early, as usual. The sunlight poured into her room, and the distant sound of seagulls called her outside. She dressed quickly, grabbed her notebook, and hurried downstairs. Her father was already drinking coffee on the porch, reading the morning paper. "Heading out so early?" he asked with a smile. "Adventure calls," Clara replied with a grin, hopping on her bike. "I'll be back before lunch." She pedaled quickly down the empty streets, the wind in her hair. When she reached Sam's house, he was already outside, tossing pebbles into the bushes. "You're late," he teased as Clara skidded to a stop. "I'm never late. You're just early," Clara shot back playfully. "Where to today?" Sam asked. Clara pointed toward the cliffs. "The lighthouse. I have a feeling there's something there we haven't seen yet." Sam raised an eyebrow. "We've explored the lighthouse a dozen times." "Not like this," Clara said mysteriously, pulling out her notebook. "I was sketching the lighthouse last night, and I noticed something strange. A shadow in the window at the top. The lighthouse is supposed to be abandoned, right?" Sam's expression shifted from playful to curious. "You think someone was up there?" "I don't know, but I want to find out." Sam hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Let's do it." The two friends cycled toward the edge of town, where the cliffs rose high above the sea. The lighthouse, tall and weathered by years of wind and rain, loomed in the distance. It had been decommissioned decades ago, and everyone in town claimed it was empty. When they reached the path leading up to the lighthouse, Sam looked around nervously. "It feels different today, doesn't it?" "That's because you're imagining things," Clara said, though she too felt a strange energy in the air. The lighthouse door was slightly ajar, which struck them both as odd. "I don't remember it being open last time," Sam whispered. "Maybe the wind blew it open," Clara replied, though she wasn't entirely convinced. They pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled faintly of salt and old wood. Sunlight filtered through the dirty windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Everything seemed quiet, but Clara could feel her pulse quickening. "Let's check the top," she said, pointing to the spiral staircase that wound its way up the lighthouse. "Do we have to?" Sam asked, looking uneasy. "Are you scared?" Clara teased. "No, just cautious," Sam muttered. Clara led the way up the creaking stairs, with Sam close behind. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the narrow space, and the higher they climbed, the darker it seemed to get. At the top, they reached a small wooden door leading into the lantern room. Clara pushed it open, and the two friends stepped inside. The room was circular with large glass windows overlooking the sea. The lantern itself, a massive, rusted mechanism, sat in the center of the room, silent and still. "It's empty," Sam said, sounding relieved. Clara frowned. She moved closer to one of the windows and looked around. "Wait, look at this." On the floor, near the lantern, was a pile of crumpled papers. Clara knelt and picked up one of the sheets. It was covered in strange markings, symbols and diagrams that she didn't recognize. "What is this stuff?" Sam asked, peering over her shoulder. "I don't know, but it looks like—" "Maps?" Clara said, unfolding another sheet. This one showed a drawing of the lighthouse and the surrounding cliffs, with a large X marked in one corner. Sam's eyes widened. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Clara nodded, her heart racing. Treasure. The two friends spent the next few hours examining the papers. Most of the writing was faded and illegible, but the drawings were clear enough. The X on the map seemed to indicate a spot near the bottom of the cliffs, close to a small cave that they had never explored. What if there really is something there? Sam whispered as they sat outside the lighthouse, looking out at the ocean. There's only one way to find out, Clara said, folding the map carefully. We have to check it out. By late afternoon, they had made their way down the steep path that led to the base of the cliffs. The waves crashed against the rocks, sending sprays of seawater into the air. Clara and Sam carefully picked their way across the rocky shore until they reached the cave marked on the map. It doesn't look like much, Sam said, peering into the dark entrance. It's bigger than it looks, Clara replied, pulling out her flashlight. Come on. They stepped inside the cave, the sound of the ocean muffling behind them. The air was damp and cool, and their footsteps echoed against the stone walls. Clara shone her flashlight ahead, revealing a narrow tunnel leading deeper into the cliffs. This is crazy, Sam muttered, but kind of awesome. The tunnel twisted and turned until it finally opened into a small chamber. Clara's flashlight swept across the room, and her breath caught. In the center of the chamber was an old wooden chest, covered in dust and surrounded by rocks. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. No way, Sam breathed. Is that? It has to be, Clara said, moving closer. She knelt beside the chest and ran her hand over the rough wood. The lock had rusted away, leaving the lid loose. With Sam beside her, Clara carefully lifted the lid. Inside, they found coins, jewelry, and small trinkets, all aged and tarnished, but unmistakably valuable. It's real treasure, Sam whispered, his voice full of awe. Clara grinned. I told you there was something here. They spent a few moments examining the contents of the chest. Among the items, Clara found an old journal, its pages yellowed and fragile. She opened it carefully and began to read. It's a sailor's log, she said, flipping through the pages. He must have hidden this here a long time ago. Maybe to keep it safe. Sam picked up a small coin and held it up to the light. Do you think anyone else knows about this? Clara shook her head. Not anymore. It's been forgotten. Until now. That evening, as the sun set over Windermere, Clara and Sam sat on the cliffs, looking out at the ocean. They had decided to take a few small items from the chest, enough to remember the adventure, and leave the rest untouched. The cave and its treasure would remain their secret. We actually found treasure, Sam said, shaking his head. I can't believe it. I can, Clara replied with a smile. Sometimes you just have to look a little closer to find the extraordinary. Sam laughed. What's next? Are we going to search for pirate ships? Clara grinned, holding up her notebook. You never know. There's always another mystery waiting to be discovered. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Clara felt a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. The lighthouse, the cave, and the treasure. They had all been part of something much bigger. And though the adventure was over for now, Clara knew it was only the beginning of many more to come.